looking at the schedule, we have now time for questions to read. Joe, I can also address questions from the audience. So I invite anyone who would like to ask a question to come forward to the microphones.
This question is more for Reed. As infrastructure professionals, how do we apply LCAs to our projects? Or does that responsibility fall to consultants, owners, et cetera? I just want to know your take on that.
Yeah, thanks. That's a great question. I had the opportunity to head down to Boston a couple of weeks ago for the ASCE's Structural Engineering Institute had a Towards Zero Carbon workshop where they brought in, I'd say ballpark 100 folks from around the country to talk about these issues. And one thing that's happening within structural engineering is the SE 2050, which is a commitment amongst a lot of firms to have their portfolios decarbonized by that year. And they're recognizing that that feels a little too far off. So they're starting to make interim challenges too, but that's really picking up pace. And in conversations with engineers throughout that workshop, it's clear that there's a mix of things happening. There are people within the firms, within engineering firms, who are tasked with interpreting EPDs, environmental product declarations, and LCA results because they're trying to, on the fly, inform their design decisions. And they're also working with outside consultants. So it's a bit of both. And that's part of the motivation for us to create this Fundamentals of LCA micro-credential, which will be a fully online, sort of like a short course, so that folks are, increasingly going to be exposed to these things within their roles, that they'll have some know-how. We also offer a course on campus, of course, but yeah, I think it's going to be a mix of industry professionals gaining the skills to be able to apply it within the projects they're working on, and also working with outside consultants that really have that specialty to provide some additional guidance. Thanks for the question.
Thanks, Reed. I will actually ask a question myself, and this goes to Joe. Can you say more, Joe, about the grant from EPA that has been recently announced, and about how ACMA, the Trade Association for Composites Manufacturers, and IACME, the Institute for Advanced Composite Materials, by the way, our center, Structures and Composite Center, is a member of both entities. And the partnership that Joe mentioned was the CIRCLE partnership. It's very visual, the acronym. And what we would like to ask you, Joe, now is, what does it mean for the composites industry? We have some members here from the industry. And also, what does it mean in transportation infrastructure? What does it mean for agencies like DOTs, for structural engineers and designers?
So that was a planted question. And so probably the first way to answer it is to show you a video. It's a 2-minute video that will tell you about CIRCLE. And this video was actually part of the application that IACME and ACMA submitted together to the EPA. So Sean, if you can pull it up, and then I'll say more. Oh, sound. Sean, it doesn't sound like we have sound.
Sorry, just a moment. Almost there. Suspense. All right.
All right, I can take it from here, okay?
Thanks, Joe.
Fabricated composite products. There are not a lot of environmental product declarations, okay? This is gonna help composite fabricators who make things like bridge decks, girders, utility poles, building cladding, generate environmental product declarations, okay? Because there's a paucity of them. There's very few. What it's going to mean is that they will now have the information that people like the DOTs and the Army Corps of Engineers are using to make decisions. So I mentioned on one of my early slides that the DOT had provided $2 billion worth of grant opportunities to state DOTs to use low carbon transportation materials. They just announced the first tranche of that. It's $1.2 billion. In that program, they say there are certain eligible materials that can qualify for these grants. What are those materials? Steel, concrete, asphalt. FRP is not listed. Okay. This program, this Circle Initiative will help get FRP in the game. EPDs are really like table stakes. You need EPDs to be in the game, and that's what Circle's all about.
Joe? Do we have other questions for the panelists? Jenny? You want to go to the microphone? Yes.
Will these EPDs have like the kilograms of CO2 emission per kilogram? Is that the whole point? Like, so
So-
will be transparent?
So, yes, in responding to the EPA's grant, which was titled Reducing Greenhouse Gas Emissions, the big focus is on reducing GWP, reducing CO2 emissions, because that's the one that people talk about most. But as Reed could probably explain a lot better than me, there are other impact categories that also go into an LCA, things like ozone depletion and eutrophication and acidification. And these EPDs will also provide environmental impact in those categories. But obviously, you see from the title that the EPA is interested in CO2 reductions. That's going to be a huge focus. But these other categories, you might want to say a little bit more about the other categories.
Well, sure. Yeah. Thanks for the question, Jenya. The way it works again is that we have these ISO standards that govern how all LCAs are conducted. They've been in place for decades. And then industry stakeholders get together and say, here's the rules for how we're going to assess this product category. So for instance, there's one forthcoming about thermoset rebar. And then that will determine what the functional unit being evaluated is. So whether they're putting out the results per kilogram or per meter cubed or per bridge length, that gets decided in the product category rules. It also goes into the nitty-gritty to remove any sort of attempt to remove subjectivity that a life cycle assessment practitioner might have in making choices so that we can ensure comparability. And the reports that we get now, the environmental product declarations, tell you a little bit of information about the product, and then it gives you a table of results across the different life cycle stages and across the impact categories. Commonly in the US, we use Tracy from the US EPA, which is a set of impact categories. And there was a discussion at this structural engineering workshop about interest in having even more transparency. So folks wanting to understand a little bit more what's behind the scenes of these. So there might be some initiatives to give even more transparency to these. I'll also mention that there's a third-party review involved so that someone is checking to make sure that the analyst who performs it adheres to the rules. So I think there's still room for growth in EPDs so that people have even more confidence in the numbers, but they're definitely a great starting point. Thanks.
We have time for one more question. Yes, do you want? Oh, yes, thank you. Reminding me. Good.
I think we had one over here.
Yes, please.
Looking at all your environmental impact factors. I felt like maybe there was something missing, and I was just wondering if it ever comes about, landfill usage. Like how often do these products end up sitting in a landfill?
Yeah, that's a really great point. So talking about what happens at the end of life. And so there's two common system boundaries, if you will, for the life cycle assessment. When it's cradle to gate, it's really just looking at the production. As Joe was talking about, EPA has interest in moving more to cradle to grave. And that's where we want to think about, okay, I gave the blender example, right? Maybe the product category rule says we want a blender that makes 2,000 smoothies. Well, if you make a piece of junk that only lasts for 500, then to meet that, I would need 4 of those. Okay, so we recognize how often things become waste based on their lifespan. And then we also look at opportunities for recycling. Is the polymer you use recyclable? Are you using a metal that's recyclable? Opportunities for reuse are a little harder to characterize, but that's a big movement as well. Can you take this thing and turn it into something else instead of applying a lot of energy to break it down into its substituent components? So yeah, I think a little bit of a challenge with that is because these things happen out into the future, so it's hard to know how our recycling systems are going to advance. Are we going to have landfills or incinerators? So what's important in a good solid LCA is to have some uncertainty there, recognizing that the future is unknown. So I can't tell you to 5 decimal points what the answer is, but I can give you a range of where it probably will be. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Joe and Reed, for a great presentation and conversation. And I would like again to remind everyone that we have the red tickets. I haven't used mine yet. To select the best student poster contest. So it can be a great opportunity if you haven't done it. Take advantage of the lunch break. You all have 3 tickets. You can place them again to your favorite posters, student posters. And we have time until 3 p.m. to do that. So again, I have to do it myself. Any questions? Amanda Collermore is in the back of the room, can help us with regard to selecting the best student posters. And now, and very important for all of us, is lunch. And every table during the lunchtime will have surveys. And please take your time, use the lunchtime to complete. It's not a long survey, and it's very important for us. We take it very seriously. We look forward to your feedback. The whole TIDC team will evaluate this. So again, look at that. And I have here a recommendation. We exit through the rear doors to my left. Am I right? Amanda? Yeah. Okay, thank you. And we'll re-enter the room through the door in the wall. That one, if I'm correct. And again, we have a break until 1:15. We have an hour. Okay, so this is a great time for conversations, contacts. One of the important outcomes of our conference is really the face-to-face, rubbing elbows, conversations, and important contacts. I look forward to talk with many people here in the audience. And well, we'll see you this afternoon. We have exciting sessions following. And I would like to thank our sponsor, Avient, who has provided the support for the lunch. Avient is a supplier of a product called Polystrand that is continuous fiber reinforced thermoplastics. We have used that product in different applications. The rebar is being one of those. Thanks again, and see you through lunch.